Broadcasting from Manhattan Beach and the World Wide Web, you're listening to CHSR, HealthyLife.net.
As a service to our listeners, this program is for general information and entertainment purposes only. CHSR, HealthyLife.net does not recommend, endorse, or object to the views, products, or topics expressed or discussed by show hosts or their guests. We suggest you always consult with your own personal, medical, financial, or legal advisor.
Bonjour, dear listeners. I greet you in the language of my Potawatomi ancestors and my tribe today. I am Randy Kwiatkowski, host of this show. I am an enrolled tribal member of the Citizens Potawatomi Nation. This episode of Indigenous Perspectives originates not from my tribal homelands, but from Endakina, the unceded traditional territory of the Abenaki people, who for thousands of years were and continue to be stewards of the lands to be found in the state of Vermont, in the northeastern United States, and across the Canadian border in southern Quebec province. I begin by acknowledging where we come from, as this program focuses on understanding our roots in Mother Earth and our connections with ancestors. The theme of being rooted in Mother Earth is the focus of today's program, Intimate Encounters with Mother Nature. Many of you are familiar with the fact that Indigenous people have deep spiritual connections with the natural world. Documentaries, ethnographic literature, fiction, much of it written by Native Americans, and my own book all reinforce this notion. At the same time, these portrayals of Indigenous people run the risk of sending another message, that those with Indian or First Nations ancestry are the only humans who have the ability to have and hold on to deep spiritual connections with Mother Earth. This idea can discourage individuals from the joy of feeling connected with the natural world around them, and it can also discourage us from collectively developing the respectful and reciprocal relationships with nature that we need to cultivate if we are to emerge from the current culture of exploiting the natural world. It's no coincidence that I met today's guests while taking an online course offered by Sterling College here in Vermont. That course is called Surviving the Future, a title that expresses a concern many of us hold. Today's guests come from varied geographic locations. Jordan Tierney comes from Baltimore. Yves Gonnet comes from here in Vermont. Bob Hawk comes from Vermont. Christina Zill comes from the Catskill Mountains in upper New York State. And Christine Krizwanis comes from Vermont also. Stephanie Krizwanis. So let me introduce my first guest. Who would like to go first? Don't be shy. You're going to force me to pick somebody. Bob, go ahead. Oh, Christina, please, go ahead.
So I always lived in big cities before moving to the Catskill Mountains. I've been living here full time since 2004. And everywhere that I lived, I would always have a moment where I would be afraid inside of space. Maybe that was from growing up in Houston, Texas, which is kind of a scary place. And so, for instance, sometimes when I was a teenager, I would just suddenly have to run outside because the house scared me. And I always liked in New York City the way that you can live in an apartment where you can see everything. And somehow that fear just totally went away when I moved to the country up here, because this is really wilderness. And it was really, it came home to me one time when I went out to the tool shed, and I had a flashlight and I heard a noise. And that's the part in the scary movie when people are saying, don't run, turn around, don't go in there. And I was totally fearless, and I just turned on the light, and it was like, oh, it's a skunk, no big deal. So I just, it really came into my own when I moved up here to the country.
That reminds me a lot. This is Eve, Christina, of my upbringing. I grew up in a big city in New York City, but I was super fortunate in that I got to spend a lot of time for as far back as I can remember in the woods at family members' houses. And one of the things that I will never forget, because it's certainly a part of me now, is playing in the water, specifically in a tiny little stream not far from the house, and experimenting with building and unbuilding dams, and how I'd get so immersed, if not soaking wet, in my experience, that I'd often have to be called in because it'd get dark and I'd still be playing around. So I really appreciate what it's like to touch and feel and be a part of even the most sort of rudimentary and untechnically complicated places.
Hi, this is Jordan from Baltimore, and I do currently live in a pretty big city, and I grew up in suburbs but had access to a big empty field in the back with a swamp, and that was fascinating, you know, and I had grandparents where I learned to row and fish and find clams with my toes. And, you know, I would say when people ask me, you know, what's one of the favorite periods of your life, it was all the hours we spent up in trees as children. I'm not sure exactly what we were doing up there, but we really spent hours and hours up in trees until we got called in again at dinner time. And I now feel like, Christina, this refers to something you brought up, that the architecture of my elementary school, the first time I really left home and went to an institution-like place, was almost prison-like. It was designed in the 60s, so it couldn't have been that bad. But I remember that sort of cutting my life force off from everything I knew and loved. It was so hard and so sterile. And I think that really, for some reason, though, I continue to spend, you know, my adult life in cities, Washington, D.C. and Baltimore. However, I would say that wherever I go, you know, on vacation or whatever, I'm not comfortable for the first 24 hours until I've seen the sun set and rise and understand where that happens and how. And then if it's going to be an extended stay, a move, for instance, I need to see all 4 seasons, because until that time, I don't know this place where my feet are. So I guess I'm grateful for those things, even though sometimes the absence of them can cause some stress.
Stephanie, go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Stephanie from Vermont. Hearing your experiences of encountering the wild and built human terrains kind of makes me think of an experience I had in college. I went to school in suburban Chicago, and I was walking with my best friend at night, which we often did, and we walked past the tulips. And for me, tulips were a significant flower because I grew up in a town that had a tulip festival every year. So he asked me for a tulip, and I picked this beautiful white flower. I picked it up from its roots, and I gave it to him. And he opened his mouth and he ate the whole thing. It was comical, and it felt like a big moment between us. And my friend later committed suicide that year. He was really, really struggling. And then the next winter, I returned to school, and I was walking past that exact same spot at night. And I looked up in the snow. It was the same spot where the tulip was. And there was a great white snowy owl just sitting there looking at me. And I just stopped in my tracks and kind of locked eyes, you know, with this yellow-eyed bird. And it felt like time stopped in a way. And I just remember slowly I would take a step, and I kind of made a half circle around this bird. But it felt like something else was going on beyond what was happening. It felt like there was a presence I couldn't really explain. I was probably with the bird for 10 minutes before the trance broke, and I went back up to my room and looked out the window. I could still see the bird. But that moment is something that has always really stuck with me.
Thank you. When you first told me that story, I thought of events I recorded in my own book about the visitations of owls surrounding the time of people, as we say, walking on, also other raptors, and in Native American lore, raptors are messengers. We don't always know exactly what the message is, but as you said, you feel that there is a connection, there is some message being brought to you, and it's very often up to you to figure out what it is. Thanks. Bob, you want to go?
Sure. I'm a Navy brat. We moved every 3 years. As a matter of fact, the first dwelling that I've lived in longer than 3 years is this place here in Vermont that my wife and I built ourselves. And I've been here now for almost 41 years. And I'd like to share with you something. My encounter with flowers. And in preparing for this, I wrote down a few thoughts, and this is what I wrote. Do plants understand human language? Can they sense a bond between themselves and their human caretaker? I discovered a love for working with the soil when I had my first garden in Heidelberg, Germany. There was something magical, new to me, about planting and caring for flowers and vegetables and being rewarded with an abundance of gifts. I felt at peace there among them. When I returned to the States in '76, I stopped by my garden for the last time on a calm and sunny day. As I closed the garden door and said goodbye, a strong wind blew up and all the flowers waved back. I quickly shut the door, overcome with emotion that I could not explain, for I had no context to understand the language that was being spoken. I have another episode or two, but I'll save those in case anybody else wants to add anything.
It's really beautiful. Thank you so much. And I'm intrigued because a lot of you are contrasting your urban and rural experiences, but in some cases you've managed to find intimate connections within an urban setting. And I think another stereotype that we have to deal with is the notion that if you're not living in the wild, unspoiled nature, you don't make those connections. And Jordan, you've given me some examples of your work in Baltimore. Would you be willing to share the workshop, information about the workshop you do? I think it's really relevant, picking up on Bob's comments.
Sure, Randy. Thank you. Jordan from Baltimore here. Yes, so feeling myself trapped in the right angle and brick architecture of the city, I have always sought out those little pieces of land that most people ignore or throw their trash into. And here in Baltimore, there's a beautiful little stretch that is along Herring Run. And I began to spend at least an hour a day there with my dog and then my daughter, who was kind of a toddler at the time. And I am an artist, so I am either looking at the world and kind of absorbing it in order to translate into something visual later, or I'm picking things up, and I carry a backpack and a saw and a hatchet, not to cut anything down, but if I find anything on the ground that I can't carry out. And that turns into what I would call sort of spiritual devices that hopefully once the viewer's looking at them, they can somehow intuit or feel that connection that I feel when I walk through there. And I was thinking, as Stephanie told her story, about an owl that my daughter and I encountered So we, a little more than a year ago, moved from the little house that was right near Herring Run. We walked out our front door and could get to it. And on the day that the person who was very interested in our house, it was the evening, they were coming to look at the house one more time, so we had to get out of our lovely little house that I had renovated lovingly right near this creek. And I was so distraught at leaving this area. And so I took my daughter, because we had to get out of the house, and we went down to the creek. And it was just being dusk. And we heard a barred owl so loud that I thought someone was playing a trick on us. And it just did that. And it was such a message, like, yes, you're going to mourn the loss of this, but I'm always somewhere nearby, and it's going to be okay, and I saw you loving this place, and thank you. Just, it was such a great relationship, you know. So, yeah, you can find it. I always look for just the places no one else cares about, and there's so much down there. Blue herons, beavers, everything.
I'm struck by the owl theme in the program here. I had no idea how often it would come up. It's all throughout my book at various critical moments of wondering what's going on, what's going to happen next, have I made the right decision? It's uncanny how the owl appears. And as I describe in my book, you made the sound perfectly. In Potawatomi, it's cuckoo-o-coo, which, you know, imitates the sound of the owl. But numerous times I've gone out on nights like we're having now, zero weather, and had a conversation with the owl. And not only do I have it with one, but others come from the distance, and I can hear them get closer and closer. It's just a mind-boggling experience and a deep sense of affirmation, of connection, as Bob was saying, with the flowers waving, of nature reaching out to us. And I think that's an important lesson to take away in the first part of this program, that many people feel that they have to go out in the garden and the forest and speak to the trees. I've actually heard people say, I spoke to the elderberry bush and felt silly because I don't know what language to use, and I don't know if I would understand if it responded. It's not the way it works. You each are saying so eloquently that the message is sometimes a silent one, or just the thing they do, the motion they make, or their call, but it carries an extra message. Eve.
Yeah, it's funny that you should talk about that conversation with the owls there, because it's something that here happens in rural Vermont, where I now live as a farmer, all the time. And there actually is some sort of deep listening that I have to do, because we also have a lot of bears where I am, a lot of black bears. And as you may know, their hooting can be somewhat akin to the sound that an owl makes. And I'll never forget being outside doing some cooking over some coals, and having maybe 50 feet away from me, hearing the first hoot, and asking myself, am I in trouble here? Is that a bear? So I called out with my typical making sure that they know that I'm here. Hey, how you doing? And there was a hoot from maybe 100 feet away. Not too far away, but I was sort of triangulated between a couple of owls, and I would say something, and one would go off, and moments later another would go off. It was the most fascinating conversation, and now I have better ears, I think, for being able to distinguish the sound of a bear hoot and that of a barred owl.
I
didn't know. I didn't know. This is Christina in New York. I didn't know that bears made a hooting sound. I'll have to listen to that, because we have black bears as well.
So, Eve, the first time I had that multiple conversation, I wrote it up in my book. I was wondering, since it was a moonlit night, if they're just out collecting mice, which would be a natural thing to do. So I remember thinking, I didn't say it, but I thought, okay, 3 owls on a moonlit night gathering mice, no big deal. Maybe you're imagining things, Randy. Show me something, really to confirm that this is a spiritual experience. And the cloudy sky opened up and this giant meteorite splashed across the sky. Not one of those quick little 2-second deals, but, a very long one. And that was the heavens way of saying, Randy, it's not your imagination. This is real. We're going to wrap up the first segment here and return with our guests after a short break.
Citizen Potawatomi Nation's Cultural Heritage Center, located near Shawnee, Oklahoma, features 11 immersive galleries with digital and interactive exhibits. Visitors learn about the tribe's history from origin to modern days and gain an understanding of Citizen Potawatomi oral traditions and lifeways. Admission is always free. Open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit the Cultural Heritage Center on the web at PotawatomiHeritage.com.
Period poverty. If you don't know what it is, you should, because you can help. 1 in 4 American women struggle to purchase menstruation products this year, resulting in missed school and even loss of income. The Native American women's nonprofit, Queck Society, cares enough to give Native American students and communities their period products, and they do it across North America. Please help women with your time, donations, or supplies to maintain their dignity and celebrate their strength during moon time. Visit quecksociety.org. That's KWEK Society.org.
Listen up. The source for information and inspirational items about the struggle and wisdom of Indigenous people is the Syracuse Cultural Workers. They are committed to peace, sustainability, social justice, feminism, and multiculturalism, and they create beautiful visual materials like calendars, T-shirts, cards, and more, including their Greetings and Thanks to the Natural World accordion poster that offers daily grounding for our relationship to the earth and its many fellow beings. Get so many wonderful items. Go there now. SyracuseCulturalWorkers.com.
Randy Krakowski's book, Without Reservation, describes his spiritual awakening as a Native American. It's a powerful, life-changing story where Randy shares his journey into the realm of ancestral Native American connections and explores his encounters with Mother Earth. The book actually helps you how to reconnect with your ancestors to rekindle your access to ancestral wisdom and nature. Available in print, ebook, and audiobook format, Get Without Reservation by Randy Krakowski from all major booksellers. For more information, visit randykrakowski.com.
Feel you have no control over life? There's something you can do to make a difference for you, your family, and community. Stay positive and take a break from the dark side. Uplifting and enlightening. Listen to the positive side of podcasts. hrnradio.com.
Welcome back. We're here discussing with our guests animate encounters with Mother Earth, and we're going to pick up this discussion with Bob Hawk and his tale. Please, Bob.
Okay. Again, these are some thoughts I wrote down just to keep my senior citizen thoughts coherent. So, what is synchronicity? What is meant by the abundance of the universe? Can a piece of land call a person home? When I set out from Germany in 1976, where I was living at the time, to find a piece of land in the United States and duplicate what Scott Nearing called living the good life, I had no language for, no context, no knowledge of the animate world, the gifting economy. That dawning of understanding didn't come until a few years ago after reading Robin Wall Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass. But the sweetness of the raspberries on what has for 40-plus years been my homestead called me home, though I did not know it at the time. To make a long story short of that journey, A chance encounter with a guy I met in Germany led to my ending up in the Northeast Kingdom of Vermont. He had told me about a New Age technology center, Farallone Institute in Northern California, which demonstrated passive and active solar homes, this was back in the 70s, composting toilets, and organic gardens, which my new German bride and I visited on our search for a place to call home. When leaving, we gave a lift up the coast to a fellow who was staffed there in our caravan home of a modified 3/4-ton Chevy window van, and who shared the name and address of his Peace Corps friends in Hardwick, Vermont, when we shared our dream for a homestead. When we arrived in Vermont, having never been there before, it was an instantaneous recognition that we had found nirvana. Those new friends introduced us to two more friends, also back to the land hippies, who knew of a place to rent that was about 1.5 miles from our unknown future homestead. But my intellectual brain resisted the call of the land. While traveling the back roads, I remember saying to my wife that, quote, this was the last place I want to live, as the road narrowed down to almost one lane. It took 3 realtors who brought us to the same 40 acres before the last one said, let's get out and walk around a bit. Then my foraging savvy wife discovered the sweet raspberries and said, let's buy this piece. It feeds us. The sweetness of the raspberries had called us home.
Beautiful story. Thank you. And I just want to point out to listeners that you're talking about a piece of land. You're talking about landscape as well as raspberries, which is beyond the more familiar notion of flora and fauna having animacy. And on that theme, Stephanie, I know you have a story to tell that picks up on this notion of landscape being more than object.
Hi, this is Steph. Yeah, and I'd say for me, I'd replace the word landscape with icescape. In my late 20s, after my religious beliefs left me and I was pretty grieved about it, I went to Europe and visited all these ancient pilgrimage sites, kind of hoping for like a quickening of my spirit. I didn't find that, and I ended up spending the summer working in Alaska, where I encountered glaciers for the first time. And for me, like the way that I would describe glaciers is that they have presence. And I felt a connection to them that it was hard to explain. And looking back, I grew up on Lake Michigan, and of course, you know, most of the world is carved by glaciers, but the Great Lakes were like basins with these massive glaciers, and that was always a place I felt safe. But encountering glaciers in Alaska led me to work and live in Antarctica for 5 years, on and off. There's just something kind of magical and unspoken about them where, you know, I've heard a lot of people talk about Antarctica being an empty place, a void place that's barren of life, but for me it feels very full and very alive.
What did you encounter in the Antarctic?
Besides glaciers?
Yes.
Hearing everyone's other stories about birds. Some of the encounters I've had down there have been with penguins. And for me, my first penguin encounter came probably at my lowest point there. Kind of one thing you can say about Antarctica is that everything there, if it had intent, seems like it's trying to kill you because it's a really, really harsh place to live. And one day on the ice, I was standing on the frozen sea, and out far in the distance, my companion and I saw this black dot just like making a beeline for us. It had seen us before we had seen it. And I kind of crouched down on my knees, and it came and circled us, very curious, very playful, just like very childlike. And it was such an antithesis to the incredibly intense landscape around us, because here is this very tender creature, and it just brought an experience of tenderness. I do know people who have gotten what we call penguin married. So penguins give each other rocks when they court each other. And one of my friends was at a penguin rookery and held up a rock for a penguin that she thought was staring at her. And the penguin came and picked up the rock, brought it to its nest, set it down, and then came and picked up a different rock and brought it to her and sat down next to her. So they exchanged this gift of a rock, which was pretty remarkable.
Such a beautiful story. We've all heard stories of people who feed birds at the bird feeder having a crow or another bird bring a gift and leave it on the railing or at the bird feeder. And it's sad that some of us don't have the time to appreciate and embrace those experiences. We'll take another brief break, and then we'll be back, and here's some more of these amazing stories. You guys are fantastic. Welcome back to the program. We're going to continue with more inspiring tales about the ability of people in the mainstream to have experiences that we sometimes associate exclusively with Indigenous people. Christina, I know you have a story you'd like to share. Please.
My husband and I, when we built our house, the first thing that happened was that the Phoebes moved in, even though there was a lot of loud construction going on. But they decided that our very tall eaves were just perfect for them. And a Phoebe is a flycatcher. They feed exclusively on insects. And so I've actually raised a Phoebe even from a baby, because one time the parents pushed the two babies out of the nest because they were covered in mites. And only one of them survived, and I raised it to the point that it rehabilitated, and I would go to the forest every day and feed it, give it a little supplemental food. And there's just no feeling like having a bird come fly to you through the forest and land on your shoulder. It's just the most incredible thing. So Phoebes are very much a part of our life, and of course they're migratory birds. And so every Christmas, my husband and I were going to Texas to go see his family. And one morning we were sitting in bed, and a Phoebe came and looked in the window at us. And, I had never seen a Phoebe around their house, which was outside of Austin, about 45 minutes outside of Austin. And here was this Phoebe looking at us, and we just had to wonder, is that our Phoebe saying, I didn't realize you guys were migratory too.
My relatives would say it might not be the same Phoebe, but it might be the spirit of the Phoebes that somehow have some remarkable ways of sharing knowledge about the humans they can trust. Beautiful story. Jordan, Eve, go ahead, Eve.
Well, I was just thinking what Christina was talking about, seeing something out the window. And what I see out that my southern-facing windows are just these expanse of woods. And close to the house, they're all very, very new, because it used to be a night pasture for cows, and up until 75 years ago was really just completely grazed down. But the trees are now, coming in. They're good diameters, and we've got a path that goes through that sort of new growth. And often I'll just be looking out the window and figure it's a good time to go and take a walk to one of my favorite spots, which leads through these very young trees. And there's a sharp contrast once you get just a few hundred feet up this path. It starts to become very, very ledgy, and you can just transition from grass and moss onto this bedrock path that goes through a very, very dense area that's maybe another few hundred feet of very short, wind-blown hemlocks. And there's just no wind all of a sudden. They're completely screening it out. And so you get this very sort of serene quality where you're able to really hear everything, whether it's, you know, rodents running around or birds moving through the trees or, you know, getting terrified by kicking up a grouse that sounds like a helicopter taking off next to you. And one of my favorite places is not too far down this path. It's really inaccessible by anything other than walking. There's this ridgeline that is cliff-faced on one side and just goes up about 150 feet. And right over the edge of this ridgeline, you find yourselves in this old growth forest with trees that I've been told are 300 and 400 years old. They're immense and they're unbelievably tall and they block out most of the sunlight. And the canopy, or rather the floor of the forest there that rolls down towards a brook behind our house and that goes up into the mountains, is just one of the most fabulous places that I go just to be with the trees and pay attention to everything and nothing at the same time. It's just so relaxing. And there's all this amazing stuff that happens there.
So in terms of connecting with trees, Jordan, you do a workshop to help urban people imagine their way back to connecting with trees. Could you briefly summarize what you do?
Yes. So my sort of soulmate is this herring run. And I find the trees to be equal persons to me. And I know many of them intimately. And if you showed me a picture of one, I could tell you exactly where it is. And so I thought, you know, if people are going to help this climate business that we're all dealing with, they need to fall in love with nature. And some of them never even step foot in it. And how would I facilitate that? So what I ask of them is that we all meet in this place and we go our separate ways, each person, and spend, you know, a little bit of time wandering, open-minded, open your heart to what you hear and see, and then kind of notice a tree that somehow calls your name, and then sit and be with that tree. And maybe pick something up off the ground near the tree, a few things, could even be trash. Sometimes I have people make a sort of a bundle, a sculpture of things that they find on the ground near their being. But they come back and I ask them each one by one in the first person to describe what life is like as this tree. And, you know, the first few times I gave this workshop, I thought, maybe this is silly. But people are just so moved. It's apparently a very provocative thing to do, to become a tree. And maybe it's a little presumptuous to think that you could speak for this tree, but I feel that if you're observant enough, for instance, you know, there's a tree that's fallen over the creek, and what does it feel like to have those plastic bottles scrape across your back when the creek floods? Just like put yourself in the shoes, so to speak, of the tree. And so that's the way I hope to get people starting to connect with even the inanimate things around them.
Thank you. Again, another astounding tale. We're going to have to wrap up this segment. We have one more, and I don't want to discourage you from telling us more tales. I could probably listen for hours, and I think our listeners could. But I'd also like to back a little bit up and ask a question I know that listeners would if they could call in on this show today, and that is, so how do I get started? I've never done this. I've never had this experience. If you could reflect on that during our break, and then some of you give some advice to listeners in the final segment, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
Located near Shawnee, Oklahoma, Citizen Potawatomi Nation is Potawatomi County's largest employer with a rich history and culture as a sovereign Native nation. Learn more about CPN by visiting its website, which includes information on services for members, tribal enterprises, government and constitution, the newspaper, and much more. All at Potawatomi.org. That's Potawatomi.org.
Randy Krakowski's book, Without Reservation, describes his spiritual awakening as a Native American. It's a powerful, life-changing story where Randy shares his journey into the realm of ancestral Native American connections and explores his encounters with Mother Earth. The book actually helps you how to reconnect with your ancestors to rekindle your access to ancestral wisdom and nature. Available in print, ebook, and audiobook format, Get Without Reservation by Randy Krakowski from all major booksellers. For more information, visit randykrakowski.com.
Since 1975, Inner Traditions has been publishing books for the healing and spiritual journey. Their mission is to rediscover, preserve, and protect these spiritual traditions of the world so that humanity will forever have the tools to create a better future that will celebrate and heal the earth. Inner Traditions books, card decks, and other products are available wherever books, ebooks, and audiobooks are sold. Or visit InnerTradition.com's online bookstore. And while you're there, sign up for their free newsletter to receive special offers. That's InnerTraditions.com.
Period poverty. If you don't know what it is, you should, because you can help. 1 in 4 American women struggle to purchase menstruation products this year, resulting in missed school and even loss of income. The Native American women's nonprofit, Queck Society, cares enough to give Native American students and communities their period products, and they do it across North America. Please help women with your time, donations, or supplies to maintain their dignity and celebrate their strength during moon time. Visit quecksociety.org. That's KWEK Society.org.
Don't get angry. Anger is a negative emotion that suppresses your immune system that may cause health problems. Make a positive difference by working together to protect and support your family, friends, and community. Take a break from the dark side. Uplifting and enlightening. Listen to the positive side of podcasts. HRNradio.com.
Christina, why don't you lead off the final segment here, talking about your experience and how it might apply to our listeners?
How somebody might get started with nature. I think, obviously, one of the great things to do is just to sit quietly and listen to birds, which, believe it or not, is very difficult for some people to do. I've had people over, and we're so fortunate that we live near the woods, and we can hear the beautiful trill of the wood thrush, which sounds like Pan playing his flute in the woods. It's just the most magical thing you've ever heard. And I'll say to someone, listen. I'll stop the conversation and listen. Just listen to the bird. And it's amazing how friends of mine, even friends who I think of as being more sort of awakened in their consciousness, cannot stop and listen. They can't do it. You know, they can't just sit there and just take in the beautiful bird. Now, I was a kid who loved bugs, and a lot of kids love bugs. Mostly little boys love bugs, and in fact, I had a brother who would very meanly kill my bugs, and I would run to my mother and say, "He deaded my bug." I was so upset. So I have continued this love of bugs, and I would say that one thing that you can do that's really fun, because we all wish that spiders would eat bad bugs instead of good bugs. Since people, if they're living in a suburban neighborhood, for instance, probably have an experience with mosquitoes. You have to get very good at when a mosquito lands on you at just stunning it and then picking it up and throwing it in a spider web and then watching the spider come out of its lair and pouncing. You almost feel like you're catching nature in the act and you're not supposed to really see that. There's something that's just so incredible about watching this cycle of life. So just very simple things like that. You can just go and sit in nature and just sit there quietly for a moment and watch nature come back to life. So those are several things that you can do to get started with sort of a journey into nature.
Bob, you wanted to pick up on that theme. Why don't you run with it?
Sure. I think Christine is exactly right, that it takes time. It takes patience to be out in nature and listening. And perhaps even more than that, it takes permission for yourself to really accept that there is another language, there's a connection there, and that you're not cuckoo. Speaking of birds, a bunch of us back in the day would do wiki-ups, sweat lodge, and one time we had a ceremony, and each of us wanted to represent a certain animal, and I, for some reason, chose the crow. And I never made this connection before right now, but every morning of that summer, a crow would land in a tree right across from our eastern-facing window and would caw. And if I would rouse myself and get up, the day flowed. It was as if I was on, everything just happened perfectly. But if I, go away, crow, and slept in longer, the day was like driving a three-wheel car down the road, or a car with three tires and a flat.
Thank you. Eve, go ahead.
I think some of the issues that some folks have to do with language and mindset. I know that I hear all the time in discussions people referring to the environment. And it drives me a little bit nuts because it's our environment. And I think that's really one of the first steps, is to go out and be in your environment, just the part of it that's natural. And listen to it if you can, if it's not overwhelmed by other sounds. Look at it if you can, if it's not covered with stuff that's unnatural. But the one thing that you can almost always do is inhale. Close your eyes and experience it by breathing it in.
The advice you guys are giving is so pertinent. Bob, I liked your notion of giving permission. When I'm interviewed about my book and people say, why did you write a book? I say, to give others permission to go down the path that I went down. And it's not easy for people to accept that and to do it. You know, Christina, as you said, it's sometimes hard to get people who are chatting away on your back porch or at a picnic to go silent and listen. That's the prior step. Eve is saying to listen, but you've got to stop before you're ready to listen, and then you have to give people permission to feel connected. And for me at this point in my writing career, it's necessary to give people permission to tell friends about the kinds of stories that you're sharing. When I first started writing, I was terrified when people would say, so what are you writing about? And I would think, oh my God, if I tell them, I'm writing about Coy Wolf visiting me, they're going to think I'm crazy. But it was the opposite. People would gather around at a setting and lean into the conversation, totally intrigued. I want to thank you all for sharing these stories. I hope listeners get some inspiration and get some permission to go there. I hope they've gotten some useful tips, and I hope we've helped to demystify the notion that you have to be, 100% Native American to have this kind of connection with nature. So let me wrap up the program by saying, miigwech, thanks for listening. I hope the broadcast has given you time and space to reconnect with your roots in Mother Earth and with your ancestral roots. Before your busy day distracts you from this moment, I encourage you to take a few minutes to reach out and feel the presence of living flora and fauna, and perhaps even that of ancestors. Allow yourself to touch their presence. Capture that moment and hold on to it. And if you might, write to me and let me know about your experience. I can be reached at randykwiatkowski@hushmail.com or through my website at randykwiatkowski.com. Written transcripts of these shows with vocabulary assistance and a brief supplementary bibliography related to each show theme are also available on my website. Thanks for listening.
Citizen Potawatomi Nation's Cultural Heritage Center, located near Shawnee, Oklahoma, features 11 immersive galleries with digital and interactive exhibits. Visitors learn about the tribe's history from origin to modern days and gain an understanding of citizen Potawatomi oral traditions and lifeways. Admission is always free. Open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit the Cultural Heritage Center on the web at PotawatomiHeritage.com.
Period poverty. If you don't know what it is, you should, because you can help. 1 in 4 American women struggle to purchase menstruation products this year, resulting in missed school and even loss of income. The Native American women's nonprofit, Queck Society, cares enough to give Native American students and communities their period products, and they do it across North America. Please help women with your time, donations, or supplies to maintain their dignity and celebrate their strength during moontime. Visit quecksociety.org. That's Kwek Society.org.
Listen up. The source for information and inspirational items about the struggle and wisdom of Indigenous people is the Syracuse Cultural Workers. They are committed to peace, sustainability, social justice, feminism, and multiculturalism, and they create beautiful visual materials like calendars, T-shirts, cards, and more, including their Greetings and Thanks to the Natural World accordion poster that offers daily grounding for our relationship to the earth and its many fellow beings. Get so many wonderful items. Go there now. SyracuseCulturalWorkers.com.
Randy Krakowski's book, Without Reservation, describes his spiritual awakening as a Native American. It's a powerful, life-changing story where Randy shares his journey into the realm of ancestral Native American connections and explores his encounters with Mother Earth. The book actually helps you how to reconnect with your ancestors to rekindle your access to ancestral wisdom and nature. Available in print, ebook, and audiobook format. Get Without Reservation by Randy Krakowski from all major booksellers. For more information, visit randykwiatkowski.com.
Located near Shawnee, Oklahoma, Citizen Potawatomi Nation is Potawatomi County's largest employer with a rich history and culture as a sovereign Native nation. Learn more about CPN by visiting its website, which includes information on services for members, tribal enterprises, government and constitution, the newspaper, and much more. All at Potawatomi.org. That's POTAWATOMI.org.
Randy Krakowski's book, Without Reservation, describes his spiritual awakening as a Native American. It's a powerful, life-changing story where Randy shares his journey into the realm of ancestral Native American connections and explores his encounters with Mother Earth. The book actually helps you how to reconnect with your ancestors to rekindle your access to ancestral wisdom and nature. Available in print, ebook, and audiobook format. Get Without Reservation by Randy Krakowski from all major booksellers. For more information, visit randykwiatkowski.com.
Citizen Potawatomi Nation's Cultural Heritage Center, located near Shawnee, Oklahoma, features 11 immersive galleries with digital and interactive exhibits. Visitors learn about the tribe's history from origin to modern days and gain an understanding of citizen Potawatomi oral traditions and lifeways. Admission is always free. Open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Saturday 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Visit the Cultural Heritage Center on the web at PotawatomiHeritage.com. Remember, Help for a Positive Life. www.healthylife.net.